explain about the Parini Holdings Berhad. Parini incorporated in 1971 as Ohio Garments Manufacturers Companies, and the company is managed by Mr. Yong Pang Chuan. And Parini now has over 330 locations in 16 countries, including the freestanding stores, franchise outlets, and consignment counters, and has become one of Malaysian top 30 valuable brands. Parini Holdings Berhad has a market capitalization of RM 3.4 million as of January 2018. Next, I would like to explain about Aeon. Aeon was established in Malaysia with name Jaya Disco Stores Sdn Berhad. The objective to build the store to help modernize the retailer industry in Malaysia by being brought up to date management expertise as requested by our fourth Prime Minister, which is the Dato Sri Mahathir. Aeon is one of the retailer company and supermarket selling that sell a wide variety of goods such as food, clothing, household goods, and other merchandise, and shopping center operations. Moreover, I would like to explain more about Parson Holdings Berhad. Parson Holdings Berhad is an Asia-based department store operator. Parson name was confirmed on September 19, 2007. Parson is an investment holdings company and now works in the retailer sector. In addition, I would like to explain about Mr. DIY. Mr. DIY was started as a consumer hardware store in Jalan Tuanku Abdul Rahman in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia in July 2005. In 2017, the company launched its e-commerce platform and Mr. DIY was publicly listed on the Bursa Malaysia in October 2020. And last but not least, I will continue to explain more about Borneo Corporation Berhad. Borneo is a Malaysian holding and investment management firm. This company engages in products design, manufacture, advertising, marketing, distribution, wholesale, and retail of premium leather garments, footwear, jewelry, accessories, and eyewear for men and women. After being inspired by the works of Gian Bologna in Italy, Mr. Chiang San-sem, the founder of the Borneo and now the executive chairman of the Borneo Group, chose the brand name Borneo in 1977. So, if you can see in our problem statement, as well as we know, almost every company in the world is currently facing a global threat now known as COVID-19. Due to this, many businesses are closing down or going bankrupt. This is because the corporation is unable to pay off short-term debt, putting them in a position of liquidity risk. Hence, the determinants of internal and external factors that affect the transparency and liquidity of property companies in Malaysia must be identified in the studies. The study aims to determine the specific factor and economic factor of the company that affects among 5 selected retailer companies' performance in Malaysia. The goal of this study is to examine the company's specific or internal factors towards the company performance of selected retailer company in Malaysia. Next is to examine the economic factor, which is macroeconomics towards the company performance of selected retailer company in Malaysia. And lastly is to examine the company's specific factors or internal factors and the economic factor, which is macroeconomics toward the company performance of selected retailer company in Malaysia. Here we have three research questions, and the first one is what does the impact of the company specific factors or internal factors and company performance of selected retailer company in Malaysia. Secondly, what does the impact of the economic factor, which is macroeconomics, toward company performance of selected retailer company in Malaysia? And last but not least, how does company specific factors or internal factors and the economic factors, which is macroeconomics, towards company performance of selected retailer company in Malaysia? Our scope of study is consisted of 5 Malaysia companies operating in the retail sector, namely Bonia Corporation Berhad, Padini Holdings Berhad, Mr. DIY, Aeon, and Patson. The data used in the study are data from selected companies' annual reports for a 5-year period, which is from 2015 to 2019.
The first one is profitability. As we know that profitability is one of 4 pillars for assessing financial statement and overall business result. The remaining 3 factors are performance, solvency, and business prospect. These main principles are used by investor, creditors, and managers to assess how well a business is performing and the future success it might have if operations were better handled. Profit and expenses are used to calculate the profitability. Income is money earned by a company operations. So profitability is the main objective of a commercial adverse. The company's success demonstrates that its degree of progress over time. Profitability as a success metric refers to an asset ability to produce the profit, means return on asset ROA. The second one is credit risk. The prospect of borrower defaulting on a loan or other financial obligation is known as a credit risk. Credit risk is distinct from counterparty credit risk, also known as the counterparty risk, which is the risk financial counterparty defaulting before a transaction is complete. So the profitability that entity that borrow money would not be able to repay the fund received, resulting in the lender losing the principal and or interest earned, is known as a credit risk. The third one is operational risk. Operational risk is acknowledged change in characterized as the likelihood that an advance will not be reimbursed by the condition the agreement and opposed to the less very much characterized thought of the credit quality. Credit hazard is otherwise called a forward-looking idea concentrating on the plausible rate or credit challenge later. An addition or decrement of this likelihood will have a significant effect in the liquidity and working capital proportion of business loan specialists. This adjustment is in the organization of hazard related attributes in the proceeding with lot of credit extraordinary will greatly affect the rate of assortment trouble. The operational risk mainly took place related to the process and procedure because of the uses of risk identification reason through company auditing. Next is financial risk. So financial risk is a problem the modern enterprises development must face with the market economic system reform. Financial risk impact for the stable development of enterprise more serious. In this paper, by the concept and causes analysis of financial risk, we will further put forward relevant measures to avoid risk in financing from financial management, investment, capital recovery, income distribution for important aspects to make enterprise develop better. So, when you perform a company risk assessment, you can evaluate your financial risk level for multiple angles. Basing business decision of those findings can help reduce the possibility of this risk impacting your business. Next is liquidity risk. So to understand the liquidity risk, we must first understand what is liquidity. In the economic literature through the Williamson's 2008 discussion of liquidity constraint to the term liquidity can be constructed as the ability economic agents to the exchange their existing wealth for goods and service or other assets. Unlike stock, liquidity has the meaning of floater or flow concept. It can be seen from the meaning the characteristic of liquidity are commercial activity, as described in the concept of flow. Liquidity can also be defined as a behavior in which measurement in the form of cash can be converted into the stock investment and vice versa.
I will continue with sampling technique. The company's annual report from 2015 to 2019 was used to determine the relationship between the dependent variable and independent variable. Statistical technique, ordinary least square regression, or more commonly known as linear regression, is important method to do this work. Compared to other possible methods, using ordinary least square to predict this regression is simpler and more practical. Data analysis. One dependent variable, which is ROA, return on asset, and others are macroeconomic factor, firm factor, and internal and external factor. Statistical package for social science, which we use is IBM SPSS version 20. It is ability to do descriptive statistics, bivariate statistic, numerical results prediction, and group predictions.
Now let's look at the findings. First of all, profitability ratio. The return on asset ROA usually represents a company's profitability percentage. From the year 2015 to 2016, the ROA of Bonia and Parini has risen, and from 2016 to 2019 has decreased significantly. In comparison, Mr. DIY's ROA rises from 2015 to 2016. Then, in 2019, it increases moderately, but after that, it will continue to increase in 2018 and decrease to 2019. If a company has a higher ROA ratio, the company will appear to face a higher risk compared to a company with a lower ROA ratio. Next, liquidity risk ratio. Essentially, the current ratio shows the liquidity condition that calculates the contractual obligations of a company that the company is willing to pay within a year. So, on the basis of the above graph, Aeon's current ratio was not stable from 2015 to 2016 and above 1 since the current ratio of good liquidity is above 1.0. However, after a decline from 2015 to 2017, Bonia has decreased from 2015 to 2017, but then it continues to have a stronger current ratio until 2019. Mr. DIY had a low movement in their current ratio in comparison from 2018 to 2019. Pakistan has a slightly good current ratio score which was below 1, but they didn't manage to survive to have a good current ratio. Next, credit risk ratio. Based on this pattern, it indicates the total income of the company are taken out to pay the debt obligation, shows the highest ratio in 2018. It can be seen that there are higher proportion of total income are taken away to settle the debt. Meanwhile, for debt to equity of Bonia and Aeon shows a steadily constant trend from 2015 to 2019, which implies that the ability of shareholders' equity to meet the outstanding debts are increasing steadily year by year. So, the higher the ratio, the higher the tendency of credit risk will associate to a company. Next, operational risk ratio. Operational risk is described as a deviation from desired outcomes in the pursuit of company's goal. It is calculated by measuring each company's average operating ratio over the last 5 years. So, according to the graph, Padini and Bonia has the highest average operational ratio, which is 25.89%, which is higher than the 5 retailer companies' average operational ratio. So, Pakistan has the lowest average operating ratio of 5 companies at 13.01%. The operating ratio of other 3 companies, Padini, Ion, Paksan, Bonia and Mr. DIY are all below the average value, implying that they are all effective in controlling their activities and generating operating profit. Lastly, market risk. Market risk, also known as systemic risk, is a type of undiversified risk that cannot be mitigated by diversification. The shifting gross domestic product (GDP), inflation rate, unemployment rate, exchange rate and interest rate are all market risk determinants. During the 5 years from 2015 to 2019, Malaysia's GDP was unstable and unpredictable. So the inflation rates in Malaysia have been on unsteady path over the past 5 years, from 2.1% in 2015 to 3.8% in 2017. The rate of inflation has risen dramatically. Following the 2017, Malaysia's inflation rate began to drop, reaching 1% and 0.7% in both 2018 and 2019. High inflation is bad for the country because it lowers the value of money and reduces the people's purchasing power.
One that I would like to explain is descriptive statistic. Each variable descriptive statistic are assessed to explain the mean, demand, and standard deviation. The result, however, is a sample of 5 years from 2015 to 2019. Mean explain about total number as long as 5 years divided by 5 years, or as known as average, while standard deviation is a measure of the application of dependent and dependent variable. Next is correlation. Pearson correlation section is the section to explain the strongest relationship to the dependent variable, and the significant section is to find the most significantly correlated independent variable to the ROA. ROE has the strongest relationship number in the Pearson correlation section, which means that ROE has a strongest relationship with 0.902. Then the ROE and operating margin is also have a p-value 0.00, which is lower than 0.01. So you can conclude that it is strongly correlated and have a strongest relationship or significantly correlated with the ROA. For internal factor, model summary, table 1, show model summary for internal factor in Mr. DIY, Padini, Ion, Parkson, and Bonia. According to the table, the adjusted R-square as shown is 0.952, indicates that 90.5% dependent variable is explained by the independent variable, namely CG index, debt to income, ROE, operating margin, and operational ratio towards current ratio. Next is ANOVA. This is the model that have a significant value. The reading of p-value indicates that the model fit is significant if the p-value is then less than 0.1. Based on the table 2, the p-value is 0.00, representing the internal factor, including the CG index, debt to income, SCP, ROE, current ratio, and operating margin, and operational ratio give a very strong, significant relationship with the current ratio. Hence, model 1 fits the study well and it is reliable. Next is coefficient. From the table 3, we can see that the ROE, operational ratio, and APC give a very strong, significant to current ratio as their p-value is 0.00, 0.02, and then 0.08. This implies that the current ratio decrease, the ROE increase with a standardized coefficient beta of minus 0.625. And then for the external factor, model summary, the predictors, independent variable for internal and external variable from the data above are ROE, debt to income, unemployment rate, STDV, inflation rate, exchange rate, current ratio, CG index, average collection period, operational ratio, interest rate, and operating margin with a R value of 0.351. And then for the coefficient, according to model 2, the unemployment are strongly positive correlated and have the greatest impact on operational ratio with p-value of 0.001. For independent independent variable and the T is 1.167. Any improvement in the unemployment would have an effect the level of operational risk. And then for the internal and external factor, model summary, this measure can explain 97.3%, which means that the independent variable can explain 97.3% of this ROA influence. Close relation between the predictors and the dependent variable is implied by this value. And then for the coefficient, based on the SIG, the table indicates that the ROA is greatly affected by internal and external factor, which means that internal and external factor are influenced together. Therefore, interest rate, exchange rate, STDV, debt to income, and SIGI index that is not significantly influenced the ROA with p-value more than 0.10.
Limitations confined to only certain Padini Holding Berhad, Ion Pakistan Holding Berhad, Borneo Corporation Berhad, and Mr. DIY Sendirian Berhad represent the Malaysian retailers' 5-year success to financial failing from 2015 to 2019. Recommendations: important to have a comply with good corporate governance to ensure that the company is well controlled and organized. This will build the confidence of investor, which is critical to stability to compete with other companies. Conclusion: there are fluctuation movement in ROA return on asset was 23.51% with the profit 2.57 from its asset. Mr. DIY has the highest ROA among all the 5 companies, which is 0.1594. The Pakistan shows the highest credit risk ratio in 2017. The industry should pay more attention on credit operation risk, liquidity risk, corporate governance, risk management, and credit risk. 100% age in a particular age of the risk may be beneficial to company. As a result, risk management must manage them well in order to make their own interest rich and increase the company's profit level.